Om Tat Sat. Yellarigu Namaskara. Good evening, friends. Yesterday we had a look at the last few episodes of the 6th volume of Jnapaka Chitra Shaale. Today we will start with the 7th volume. A lot of public figures have been discussed by DVG, and there is a golden rule that was given to me by Nadoja Dr. S.R. Ramaswamy when it comes to public figures, and that is we should never be one-sided when we look at public figures. Very often we have certain emotions, certain ideological leanings, or certain preferences, but that should not come in the way of our evaluating a public figure, because a public figure has several dimensions. And we will have to analyze the public figure from all these different facets. And there is much to say about this balance and empathy that we must have. Almost it brings to mind Professor M. Hiriyanna's coinage, critical conservatism. That is very important when we look at public figures as well. So we should not be too enamored by them, nor we should be too critical. This is the golden mean that SRR has mentioned, and I think is very useful when we have a look at some of these public figures. In the pages of these volumes, we have seen DVG in so many avatars. Even yesterday, if you see some of the various things, his proofreading skills put to use by all and sundry. He has done Paurohitya for widow remarriages in the cantonment area. Then several activities related to public health and hygiene, which he undertook with his friends like M.G. Varadacharya and under the guidance of Dr. R. Subbarao, the health inspector at Chitra, all these people. Then his activism for putting together the Citizens Defense Group in the context of Shankar Narayana Rao I was mentioning. So this kind of work. Then his membership with the Municipal Council, the University Senate, and so forth. And in addition to this, he was part of innumerable study groups, both formal and informal, book clubs and citizens clubs, and so many clubs all throughout his life. This is as far as the externals are concerned. But the impact that had on his family life is something which is very different. So unless a family is very supportive for such an individual, from the external we see so many things, because when we read about some of the episodes, he says, every day I used to spend with Bala Saraswati, we spent so many months like this. Every evening we'd catch up with these friends and go for a walk. So almost he was not there at home most of the time, it feels like. So it is very important, and therefore the people who have got larger than life ambitions, they have to be very careful before starting a family. In fact, it brings to mind a very beautiful and poignant episode which my good friend Kashyap Naik brought up when he spoke about the great lawyer Nani Palkiwala. As a 23 or 24-year-old young man, Nani Palkiwala was a brilliant lawyer, and he was courted by a person who was from a far more higher in the echelons of society in terms of name and money and everything. He was from a fairly middle-class family, and this girl who was wooing him, Nargesh, so she used to come by car, whereas he used to go by bus on the dates. And when they were getting serious about the relationship and things were going forward, he told his fiancée, would-be wife, that I know how much difficulty my parents faced in raising me and my siblings. It is a full-time job to raise kids. It's a huge, undertaking. Whereas I want to dedicate my time and efforts and my life to the nation. So therefore, if you are interested in having kids, then we should not go ahead with it. And this lady agreed, and all through her life, they lived together without having children. And time was spent so much on nation building activities. So it is so difficult. In fact, another wonderful example that Dr. Ganesh sir has spoken on this very platform about the three ideals, Shiva, Rama and Krishna, where Shiva being a great ideal for an individual, Rama for a family man, and Krishna for a society. In Bhagavan Sri Krishna's life itself, we see his family life was not particularly great. His son was arrested by Duryodhana, and he had to, his brother had to go and bring him from Hastinapura. So even a greatest person of that kind, that caliber, his family life had to have difficulties. So therefore, just as an example, now we see the greatness of DVG, but also we have to appreciate the work that his family members have done, because DVG himself brings to mind, especially when speaking about so many of the great people, he says the wife has done so much, we have to remember her, and there are many such instances where he remembers people who have supported the great people, whether it is in the case of Venkata Krishnaya and his disciples, or in the case of Narasimhamurthy's wife, and so on. One more value add that this, of course, there are so many advantages of going through these volumes, but one wonderful thing this does when we go through the different volumes of Jnapaka, Chitra, Shaale, it brings into question certain views that today's generation takes as axiomatic. Today's generation has taken as like almost as if it is true, and this is the way it should be. For example, now if you ask any average person from this generation, they will say that democracy is the only viable best form of government. Now there are so many other forms of government and they all have their pros and cons, but now it is such a situation that without any question one has to accept democracy. Then they will say, oh, women were oppressed in the past. Irrespective of what society we are talking about, irrespective of what historical period we are talking about, it is taken as granted. Or politicians are all very corrupt. Or, these kind of things which are axiomatic, what have been accepted without any questions in today's generation. When we look at these episodes, we get to see a totally different dimension of all these various elements. Now, at the beginning of the 7th volume, there is hardly a 1.5 page preface, but it is so beautiful, and DVG sums up what he is writing in this volume. He says that the people who he has written about in the 7th volume, all of them are worthy of reverence at all times. The main objective of recording these episodes, the main driving force, he says, is so that I can paint the picture of the lives of our people of a bygone era, not just their lifestyle, but also the noble values that they upheld. And there he quotes a famous part of a famous verse from the Gita, Yadyad acharati shreshta tattat evetaro janaha. So what a person who of a certain standing does, the common people follow the standards. A great man or a great woman, the standards they set, that becomes an ideal for other people to strive and go up to. In this volume is titled Hridaya Sampannaru, and DVG gives the explanation why he has given this title. He says the word Sahridaya also has the same meaning as Hridaya Sampanna. Now, Sahridaya is a technical term used by the aestheticians, and which refers to a particular type of connoisseur. Now, many of the people who are featured in this, they have not studied Kavya, they have not studied literature, they don't know aesthetics, they don't know Rasa Siddhanta, but all of them have a very rich heart. The most important thing for a cultured person, he says, is Sahanubhuti, but without Anubhuti, where can there be Sahanubhuti? So Sahanubhuti, which is empathy, can only be there when there is Anubhuti, experience. And what is the way we experience things with our heart? So all these joys and sorrows, pains and pleasures, trials, tribulations, all these things are experienced by the heart. And all the people who are endowed with this Sahridayata are Hridaya Sampannas. And he writes about them in this 7th volume. The very first episode itself is a treat to all readers. It talks about the life and some of the episodes from the life of Professor M. Hiriyanna. Now, Hiriyanna is like an institution in himself, and there are very few personalities in the entire Jnapaka Chitra Shaale series where DVG has actually listed out all the accomplishments and given a timeline. One was Puttana Chetty, another one is Hiriyanna. Whether it was intentional or whether it so happened that he had this handy, I don't know what was the reason behind giving this detailed timeline. However, for readers, it is very useful. Just quickly go through the timeline of Professor Hiriyanna. He was born in 1871 to Nanjundaya and Lakshmi Devamma. Then he trained in the traditional manner under Periyaswamy Tirumalacharya, a great Sanskrit Vidwan of Mysore. Later, in 1891, he went to Madras Christian College, did his BA and MA. He worked as a librarian in the Mysore Oriental Library in 1891. After that, he finished the LT degree. This was called a licentiate in teaching. This was one of the degrees for teacher training and things like that. So he did the LT degree in 1895. He joined as an assistant master at the normal school in Mysore, later became the headmaster. This normal school became the teacher training college in due course. He worked there until 1912. Then during the period of 1911 and 1919, he translated the Ishopanishad, Kenopanishad, Kathopanishad and parts of the Brihadaranyaka into English, along with the Shankara Bhashya, which is the commentary, traditional commentary of Shankaracharya. He worked then as a lecturer in 1912. He joined as a lecturer in Maharaja's College. Then he became assistant professor in 1914. Then later he became a professor, which he served in Maharaja's College, professor of Sanskrit from 1918 to 1927. He also for a while served as a curator of the Mysore Oriental Library in 1921. He edited a volume of Naishkarmya Siddhi of Sureshwaracharya, then Vedanta Sara of Sadananda. Then he wrote his famous Outlines of Indian Philosophy in 1932 and Ishta Siddhi of Vimuktatman in 1933. He served as the president of the Indian Philosophy Division at the All India Oriental Conference in Mysore in 1935. Then later he was invited by the University of Madras to deliver the famous Miller Memorial Lecture Series in 1940, and he died in 1950. Unfortunately, we only have his English writings. He has written 2 books in Kannada. One was, I think, Smriti Shakti and then Bodhana Krama, both of which are unavailable. It was unavailable in DVG's time itself. He writes, if anybody has a copy or knows about these books, please let me know, I'll be grateful. So when DVG was writing this in the 70s, even then it was not available. DVG had heard about Hiriyanna and his greatness from one of his teachers who had worked with Hiriyanna in the teachers training college. But he first got the opportunity to meet this great man around 1912-1913. The Shankar Mutt in Bangalore, here in Shankarpuram, they had organized as part of their annual Shankara Jayanti program, a lecture by M. Hiriyanna. And the topic of the lecture was a training of a Vedantin, a very, very famous lecture. And there were about less than 100 people in the hall who were listening to him. But of the 100 people who were assembled, they were all luminaries. So the kind of people who had come were K. Krishnaswamy Iyer, Bedavadi Dasappa, Ramaswamaya, V. Subramanya Iyer, Karpura Srinivas Rao, K. Krishna Ingar. This was the caliber of the people. And they enjoyed the lecture and they were full of praise for it. DVG also was there and he was very impressed not just by the content but also by the manner in which Hiriyanna delivered the lecture. At the end of the talk, he went and approached Hiriyanna. He said, I would like a copy of the transcript. I would like to publish it in my newspaper. At that time, DVG was running the Karnataka bi-weekly. It used to come twice a week, midweek and the weekend. So he said, I will publish it. And immediately he gave a handwritten copy of the lecture and it was published in the Karnataka. That began that marked the beginning of a long-standing friendship between the two. Here, DVG cuts to talk about the quality of H.V. Nanjundaya, what Valmiki calls as a Purusha Saragna. He calls Rama as Purusha Saragna, a person who knows how to quickly and appropriately evaluate the strength of the other person. So H.V. Nanjundaya was one such person. I think I had spoken about Nanjundaya earlier as well. He was in the contention for becoming the Diwan around the time when Vishweshwaraya became the Diwan. Both of them were good friends and they were also from the same community, and there was a lot of talk that one of them could become the Diwan. It so happened later that Vishweshwaraya was chosen and Nanjundaya was given the responsibility of becoming the first vice chancellor of the then instituted University of Mysore. What H.V. Nanjundaya did as a vice chancellor was he identified the most eminent Vidwans in the various fields and invited them as the head of the various departments. So within a very, very short time, the Mysore University became the home to some of the finest minds of that time, whether it was S. Radhakrishnan, N.S. Subbarao, C.R. Reddy, K.T. Shah, Radhakumar Mukherjee, R. Shama Shastri of Brajanath Seal, so many people, of which one of them was Professor M. Hiriyanna. Now, Hiriyanna was not a very ostentatious person. He spoke very less. He never came push forward. He will not put forth his views. Even what was rightfully his to go and collect that, he will be very hesitant. But this kind of person was identified by H.V. Nanjundaya, speaks a lot about his caliber. Especially today, it is so rare to find this kind of a quality, because you may find people like Hiriyanna to some extent who are quietly doing their work, but it is so rare to find somebody who is having a position of power, who is able to keep an eye on silent workers. Because now, especially in the time of, the times of democracy and social media and all this thing, the people who who update their Instagram every 2 minutes, they are the ones who are seen. A person sitting in a temple and practicing 18 hours a day is not going to be seen. Whereas Nanjundaya was a person who was able to identify merit, although he held a position of power. I mentioned to you that Hiriyanna, not just Hiriyanna, but also his brothers. Hiriyanna was the eldest. His younger brother was M.N. Krishnarao, after whom the famous park is named. And the third brother was Sitaramaya, N. Sitaramaya. All the three brothers learned Sanskrit in a traditional way under Periyaswamy Tirumalacharya. So this was the traditional rigorous method. You have to memorize the entire Amarakosha, learn all the Shabdarupas, memorize the entire Dhatu Patha. So this was the method of learning. Only after they had gained some amount of proficiency in Sanskrit that they moved on to English education. Because of this foundation that Hiriyanna had in this traditional manner, one side he was very thorough with Sanskrit. He could explain any word, any root, anything so well. He had great regard for traditional scholars. He was never looking down upon them. At the same time, because he was English educated, he also had the benefit of modern education. So he was a very rare combination of this tradition and modernity together. DVG says that he was not lucky enough to hold a book and pencil and pen in his hand and sit with Hiriyanna and learn from him like he would learn from a guru. But he narrates a small episode to show the meticulous method of study of Hiriyanna. There was a wedding in DVG's younger brother's house in Mysore. Probably Sheshagiri Rao was in Mysore at that time. So he had gone to his brother's house for a wedding. And on the day of the wedding, Hiriyanna was not to be seen. The next day, in the afternoon, he saw Hiriyanna coming to his brother's house. So immediately he says, "Oh, namaste, I was hoping to see you yesterday, but the good fortune has finally arrived at this moment." Then Hiriyanna says, "I could have come yesterday also, but then you would have been very busy with all the wedding festivities. You would not have had free time. So therefore I came now, where you will have little bit of time to sit and talk." Then DVG asks him a question. He says, in our community, he was from a particular branch, subsect of Dravida Brahmana called the Periyacharana, Brihacharana or Periyacharana. And in their particular community, as part of the wedding rituals, in the end, there is a certain thing called a Neela Lohita Puja. So DVG was wondering, what is the intent and significance of this Neela Lohita Puja? Is it somewhat connected? This word Neela Lohita comes in the Bharata Vakya of Shakuntala, Kshapayatu Neela Lohita. Is it somewhat connected to that? So then they were discussing about this usage of this particular word. Finally, they had some discussion. Hiriyanna stood up and he said, "I have to go." Then DVG accompanied him all the way to his house in Lakshmipuram in Divan's Road. Hiriyanna invited DVG inside and showed him 2 to 3 student notebooks filled with notes about this one word, Neela Lohita. He had meticulously studied all these things when he was teaching Shakuntala to students. He had studied all this, made different notes from all the various sources, the usage of the word in different contexts and so on. And then DVG says, "You have already done so much of research on this one word. So what is the final conclusion?" He says, "I have placed before you all the evidence, but I cannot say for sure. So it is difficult to be conclusive about this, but this is what I have studied. And immediately DVG remembers some segment from the Rudradhyaya, the Taittiriya Upanishad, Taittiriya Samhita. He says, Namo astu Neela Grivaya, Drape Andasaspade, Daridran Neela Lohita. Then Hiriyanna says, yes, the Vedas could be the root of this. We also have this usage, and he continues there in the later part, Neela Griva, Shitikanta, Sharva, Adakshama, Charaha, that this usage is there. And the world is full of mystery. There is a certain secret that things cannot be explained so easily. So maybe Lohita the Neela is an indicator of secret, and the Lohita is an indicator of fear or terror. So this is probably the meaning of the word. This is how DVG tries to explain. To this, Hiriyanna says, it is worth thinking about it. That may be correct. When he is not sure about something, he will not say it. He will be very, very sure about it before saying something. He says, yes, this is a possibility. This you're on the, this is not wrong, but we cannot be so sure. The reason why DVG quotes this episode, he says, is because he wants to show the kind of the methodical diligence that Hiriyanna had in his study. So every aspect has to be studied thoroughly. He will not leave out anything. He will make elaborate notes, very neat handwriting, whether he's writing in Devanagari, in English, or in the Roman script, or in Kannada Lipi. Very neat, well-spaced writing. So he was very methodical. And he'll never force any opinion upon anybody. He will say, this is what I feel. And he will not ignore even any trivial things. He will study everything in detail. And he is so honest that if he is not 100% sure, he will not pronounce anything. Once there was a question about some usage in Sanskrit grammar. DVG had written something, and later he had corrected it with some other usage. Then Hiriyanna says, if we apply the rules of grammar, then we can defend your usage in this corrected version, but it is not an idiomatic usage. What you had used earlier was better. So this is the sort of care and effort that he used to put in whatever he went through. Many times I feel that giving feedback is also a great art. It is not, everybody cannot do that, because many times what happens, either the feedback is, oh, it is excellent. Oh, if we give a article to somebody, either they will say, oh, tumba chanagide. Oh, you write articles and all so nice at such a young age. You are writing very good. So this kind of feedback is totally useless, right? Because we won't learn anything from it. If at all, it is problematic because it may boost the ego of somebody who is not wise. Then other kind of person, every single letter, no, how can you use this? You cannot say attempted, you should say tried. You cannot say, so this kind of nitpicking, that also discourages the person completely. So very few people have the skill of presenting the ideas and allowing the writer, allowing the person who is created, this is not just in the case of writing, even in the case of music or painting or sculptor, any creator naturally has an attachment to what he or she has created. So on the one hand, you don't want to give a false assurance that some junk work of art is great. You don't want to give a false assurance. At the same time, you don't want to discourage the person to the extent that they will stop performing that art completely. So it has to be optimum. In fact, I am reminded there is one beautiful scene in this movie called Inception by Christopher Nolan. So in the Inception, he says, is it possible to put an idea into somebody's head? So he said, it's not impossible, but it's very difficult. So what is really important, the seed has to be planted and it has to grow organically in the person's mind, he says. That is exactly what a good critique should do. It should not say that you are wrong. It should say there are other ways of doing it. How about reading this? How about seeing that article? How about looking at that work of art? And the creator himself realizes the fault. So his ego is not hurt. He himself realizes, oh, this is not a great usage. We will come back to this similar point when we discuss about DVG's assessment of Swinburne's writings in Narasimharaja's episode. But just it is so important, a person like Hiriyanna is very, very good in the feedback he gives. This is what I feel. One may think about it. It may be meditate upon, rather than saying, no, this is how it is. He may know it is how it is, but he always like to share the views rather than force an opinion. DVG uses three words to describe the distinction of Hiriyanna's character. One is pramanikate, pramanikaro avaru. Second is parishuddharu. Third is upashantaru. Now, pramanikate is integrity. Parishuddha is a kind of wholesome purity or wholesomeness. In fact, the title of the essay itself is Hiriyannanavara Parishuddha Panditya. So, the wholesome or unsullied erudition of Professor Hiriyanna. And the third is Upashanta, Upashantaru, who is person who is having inner peace, who is Atmanyev Atmana Tushta, who is satisfied in the self, by the self, like Krishna says in the Gita. So, the words Parishuddha and Upashanta are already there in Pramanika, but I have to say it separately for the sake of explanation, DVG writes. And here, it is very interesting that when speaking about Hiriyanna, DVG has gone into the usage of the word Pramanika, which he has not done in many other places. It is a sort of a kind of subtle tribute to Hiriyanna. I will just read out from this small segment. So he says, Pramanikate endare satyavannu ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಕಡಿಮೆಗಳಿಲ್ಲದಂತೆ ತೂಕ ಮಾಡಿ ಹೇಳುವುದು. ಪ್ರಮಾ ಎಂದರೆ ಸರಿಯಾದ ಅಳತೆ, ದ ರೈಟ್ ಮೆಷರ್. ಪ್ರಮಾ ಮೀನ್ಸ್ ದ ರೈಟ್ ಮೆಷರ್, ಸರಿಯಾದ ತೂಕ. ಲೆಕ್ಕಾಚಾರದಿಂದ ಶುದ್ಧವಾದ ಕರಾರುವಾಕು. ಸೊ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ವೆರಿ ಕ್ಯಾಲ್ಕುಲೇಟೆಡ್ and very well thought out, researched, pure and firm decision. So pramanikate is not just integrity, also it is certain determination and firmness. ಹಾಗೆ ಕರಾರುವಾಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಇಲ್ಲದೆ ಕಡಿಮೆಯೂ ಇಲ್ಲದೆ ವಸ್ತು ಹೇಗಿದೆಯೋ ಹಾಗೇ ತಿಳಿದುಕೊಂಡು ಆ ಯಥಾರ್ಥವನ್ನು ಹೇಳುವುದು ಪ್ರಾಮಾಣಿಕತೆ. So in many of the episodes he doesn't go into the details of the words, but here he has gone into that maybe as a tribute to Hiriyanna, I feel. Many times I think Ganesh sir also has often spoken about this particular element, that sattva does not mean a sort of docileness. So being honest, ಒಳ್ಳೆಯವರು, ಸಾತ್ವಿಕರು, automatically we get a feeling that they are very docile, they don't say anything. So when somebody is satvika, there is also energy. Truth has to always be backed with certain kind of robustness, certain kind of energy. One need not shout, but one can be firm. Hiriyanna was like that. He would only speak in a volume that will be for, if he is talking to somebody in a room, the volume will be just sufficient so that the person he is addressing will hear him. That's all. He will not increase the volume further. So it was so measured, even his volume, what he said, but he was very firm in the truth. He did not bother about who is the other person when he wanted to speak the truth. So even when with his bosses, with other people, he never compromised on the truth. It caused him certain difficulty, but that did not deter him. He was very clear, but he did not have to be ostentatious while telling the truth. He did not feel, I am morally on a high ground because I am saying the truth. For him, that is the natural way. He always believed that nobility should be something like breathing. It should be so natural, not at all efforted. That is the very way of life should be nobility, not something like a dress you are wearing. It is a part of the breath. And naturally, he was a person who spoke less and he disliked argumentation. All these excesses in argumentation he disliked. He was not a man of excesses at all. He followed a certain precept. When he is commenting on something, it has to be to the point, it has to be relevant, and exactly how much is required, that much he would say. And DVG remembers Kolachala Malinatha's famous statement, Na moolam likhyate kinchit, na anapekshitam uchyate, na anapekshitam uchyate. So, what is not there in the moola, what is not there in the original, he will not do some swayam sahitya. He will say what is there in the original. And na anapekshitam uchyate. What is not expected, what is irrelevant, he will not say. So one is he will stick to the original text, and second is he will be relevant in whatever he is saying. So this Hiriyanna followed in every writing, every speech of his. he will adhere to evidence. If he does not have evidence, he will not speak about it. And just because he has evidence, he won't present all the evidence. He will use only the evidence that is necessary and what is cogent for that particular topic. The range and sweep of Hiriyanna in English literature was no less than his study of Sanskrit, DVG says. He had, if he had not been a Sanskrit professor, he would have very well been an English professor. In fact, he could have been a professor of philosophy, he could have been a professor of aesthetics. So all these topics were so familiar to him. But he chose to be a Sanskrit professor. He had great interest in Shakespeare and Wordsworth. In fact, in one of the instances where there was a certain discussion, he from memory quoted an entire sonnet of Wordsworth. That is a kind of familiarity he had with English literature. And regularly he studied the literary supplement of the London Times. Wherever he saw a book review, he would make a note of it. He would have a paper cutting, attach it along with the book so that the book review stays with the book. So very, very methodical in the way of working, very, very dignified and very, very meticulous in his work. Almost when we read this episode, we wonder how is it possible that such a perfect person exists? There is hardly a flaw in his, to a flaw he's good, whether it's handwriting, the way of speaking, his humility, everything is so beautiful. One thing which I think many of our friends are very would happily love to emulate but totally incapable of doing is the manner in which Hiriyanna used to manage his library. None of us, I think, have that kind of prudence that he has. Once every year, he would go through all the books in his library and pick out all the books that are second grade and third grade books and either donate it or sell it or give it away. He would only retain the best of the best books, which meant he had a small library, but the books in his library were remarkable. It is so difficult, especially people like us who are book lovers. We like to have a big rack full of books. Half of them may be junk or half of them may be thrust upon us, but we like to keep it. So it is very, I wish I can do this, but incapable of doing it, at least as of now. And very, very clean and tidy, his desk, whatever he had, all his notes would be arranged in files and kept in a particular place. He used to be in the front part of the room. Of course, beautiful DVG. Another skill of his is the descriptive portions. He writes about all the manner in which he would sit. He used to have a straw mat in the house, one reclining chair, one stool, one bench. Anybody comes will be made to sit on the chair, he will sit on the stool. If there are more than one people, they will sit on the made to sit on the bench, he will be on the stool. If somebody like DVG sits on the straw mat, he will immediately sit on the straw mat. He will not be sitting on the stool. These kind of small courtesies he was very, very particular about. In fact, some 4-5 years back, my good friend Kashyap and me had visited Hiriyanna's house on Divan's Road, and we saw that the great the room where he was studying. Almost it was like a visit to a Punya Kshetra for us. Unfortunately, that was just the time where his books were in boxes shifted to another room. Otherwise, we would have seen his books as well. But we had a wonderful, his grandson's wife who is there, who is living in that house, she showed us around the place. Wonderful experience. Similarly with punctuality, Hiriyanna was very punctual. Once he had given an appointment at 8 o'clock for DVG to meet, and the moment DVG was coming near his house, Hiriyanna was waiting outside with a notebook and a pen, and invited him and made him sit. DVG sat on a straw mat. Immediately Hiriyanna also sat there, and he started speaking about this particular query that DVG had. So, no, how are you? Will you have some coffee? First, work has to happen. Then all those things anyway are there. So finish the work first. Then we will go to other things. So in every aspect of his, there was a dignified approach, a very refined, very samskara, a lot of samskara and gentleness. That's another thing we see. Not for nothing, Dr. Ganesh has titled his monograph on Hiriyanna as Ardra Jyoti, where there is that brightness and there is also softness. That contrast is very, very rare. Sometimes the brightness will burn and the softness will not have any impact. But for brightness and softness together, we see that in Hiriyanna. sometimes when you read about his personality, we wonder if we were with Hiriyanna, we could not even crack a joke. We could not, take him out for some masala dosa and have a chit chat. For that, we need DVG. We need people like that. Hiriyanna, whereas when we are really in need of some help, we are in need of guidance, then these such people are there. So these are the people, we may not be able to spend lot of time chit-chatting and things like that, but when we really need some support, we need guidance, these people, we can be very sure that they are so reliable and so, always there with us for this kind of guidance. So we have different people in our life where Hiriyanna will be always taking the place of this mentor, a guide, an ideal to look up to. When it came to philosophy, which was one of his favorite subjects, he gave a lot of value to personal experience over bookish learning. Now, this is, like I said yesterday also, in the Eastern system of philosophy, a philosopher has to live the life that he or she speaks about. We don't have, like in the West, a philosopher in the academic sense of the word. That means in the morning he will come, will teach philosophy to all the students. Evening he will be seen in a warehouse or a brothel or in a pub. That is not, he's a philosopher because he studied all, Kant and Hegel and everything. But in his personal life, he does whatever he wants. But in our school, in the Eastern philosophy itself, knowing and becoming are not different. A person who knows, that's why in Upanishad also, a person who knows Brahman becomes Brahman. So there is no distinction, there is no theoretical knowing. If somebody knows theoretically, he only knows theoretically, he doesn't know. The word know is used, knowledge is used only when it's brought into practice. So here we have a beautiful example. This must have been 1933 or 34. So it's after the Outlines of Indian Philosophy was published. That came out in 1932. By this time, Hiriyanna is already 60 years old. Okay, just to give you a reference. 60-year-old, already done a remarkable thing in his life. He has done so many things. He's a seasoned person. He tells DVG, who is much younger than him, that there are some people who are complaining that I have not dealt with the Dvaita school of philosophy in my outlines of Indian philosophy. The reason is not because I have anything against that school. It is because I have not understood that philosophy in practice. I have not understood it as part of my personal experience. I don't have that personal experience. Do you know any good Dvaita scholars who can guide me? I would like to learn. So then DVG immediately says, yes, there are some great scholars, and he gives a few names. Do they teach by experience or do they teach by the book? Then DVG has no answer. And after this episode, about 6 months later, when DVG meets A.R. Krishna Shastri tells DVG, I believe Hiriyanna is learning Dvaita from some old, aged Dvaita scholars who has experienced Dvaita in practice. Even at the age of 60, even after writing outlines, which is so highly acclaimed, he is so eager to learn. At the same time, he does not want to compromise. And later, in the Essentials, which came out later, he wrote about Dvaita. Then I already mentioned that being trained in the traditional method, Hiriyanna had a lot of regard for the traditional school. He was not like some of the modern day people who are looking down upon traditional scholars who claim that they are the first person, I am the one who has told. He never had this kind of what we call as udafe in Kannada, right? When it comes to traditional scholars, he had great regard for them. And he often interacted with these scholars. People like, Brahmashri Palgat Narayana Shastri, then Lakshmipuram Srinivasacharya, often discussed with Hiriyanna, and he was also very fond of these Vakyarthas and the Vidvat Goshtis. He would support a lot of students. He would, at Sringeri or Kaladi, different places, he would support a lot of such ancient seats of learning. He would send out contributions. DVG says not many people will know that Hiriyanna was a person of great philanthropy, because he was so meticulous, so methodical in everything. Somebody from the outside would think that he is also very, tight-fisted. But the reality was he was silently doing lot of charity and never speaking a word about it. In fact, he used to support poor students, and one of the conditions was that you will never breathe a word about this to anybody. DVG narrates a story of one person, some Ravi or something. He has been receiving help from Hiriyanna. Every month his fees is being paid. One of Ravi's friends goes up to him and says, I'm in great trouble, financial trouble. I want some help. Can you suggest something? Then Ravi tells him, there is one Professor Hiriyanna. He will help you out. You go ask him. He has been helping me all this time. So this boy goes there. He gets help from Hiriyanna. The next month, when Ravi goes to meet Professor Hiriyanna, he gives him a packet. When the packet is opened, suddenly he sees 3 months worth of fees. 3 more months were remaining in his course. 3 months fees are kept, and he is little surprised. He used to give me the fee for every month. Now you have put all 3 months together. He said in Kannada it's even more thing. Nimige helidde nanu, with respect. He is not saying Nino. He says Nivu. Nimige helidde yargo helbedi anta. Adru nivu helbididira. Irli parvagilla. So be it. I had requested your good self not to tell anybody about this support, but you have told somebody about it. Well, so be it. Now with this, I think whatever I'm supposed to give you, whatever I had promised you, I think it is over now. So please carry on. This was the nature of Hiriyanna, never to advertise the charity and be so silent about it that nobody knows about it. Hiriyanna also lost his wife at a young age. Of course, DVG lost his wife much younger, but when he was in middle age, Hiriyanna lost his wife, and the remaining part of his life he lived like a tapasvi. So much so that B.M. Shrikantaya, who also lost his wife when he was in mid-age, he used to draw a lot of solace from Hiriyanna. So Hiriyanna gives me a lot of discipline and courage. When I see him, I get that energy, he says. We are reminded of a very nice exchange between T.S. Venkannaya and DVG in the third volume. When DVG's wife died, within a short time, Venkannaya's wife also dies. And at that time, there is a discussion, what is the right course of action? Basically, should we remarry? Should we try to start our family again? Or should we, accept the fate and be single? DVG tells at that time, it depends on each person's deha dharma. So depending on your deha dharma, you have to act. So DVG chose to remain single and not get remarried, whereas Venkannaya got married again and he had a couple of more children. And also Venkannaya died some years later in 1939, I think he passed away. He was very young. So here Hiriyanna's example, even in his personal life, he was able to face these trials and tribulations. All the writing that Hiriyanna did was with one primary goal, and that was to attain inner peace, to understand himself better. Often and often he would cite this verse from the opening section of Sureshwara's Naishkarimya Siddhi. Na khyati labha pujartham granthosmabhir udiryate swabodha parishuddhyartham brahmavin nikashasma. So swabodha parishuddhyartham, for the sake of to understand whether I have understood it properly, to check, to verify whether my understanding is correct. Have I grasped the subject well? Is there something remaining for me to understand? How deeply have I gone into the subject? Are there any errors? Are there any drawbacks or shortcomings or weaknesses? So to measure, to test, to examine myself, to scrutinize my own understanding of the subject I am writing. That was the driving force behind whatever he wrote. So this Swabodha Parishuddhyartham is very, very important because it is reinforcing our own understanding, whether we have understood correctly. It is not a display of our knowledge. It is not for name or fame or wealth, but it is so that we are convinced that we have understood. As an example, DVG narrates an episode where he met a great scholar of philosophy about 2 or 3 months after the outlines of Indian philosophy was published, and asked him whether you have seen this, have you seen the book that Hiriyanna wrote? He said, yes, I saw it in the manuscript stage itself. It is a remarkable work. Everything is so clear. If I follow that model and write a book, it will take me 15 years. That was a sort of methodology and crispness and depth in which Hiriyanna had written. And naturally, to write in this manner, if you have read anything that Hiriyanna has written, you will see that he has lot of patience. He never do anything in a rush. He will weigh every word, every sentence, every turn of phrase, every paragraph. If he is not happy, he will remove, he will rethink. So the Indian conception of values, his magnum opus in a sense, was ready long back. But he did not send it for publication. Every time that DVG used to ask him, he says, manuscript is ready, but I have to review it again. I think I will refine it a little more. I have to, check some other things. So this sort of rule that he put on himself was everything must be proper. He must be convinced. There is no rush. It's okay. As soon as we write, sometimes people are so eager to send it off for publication. Sometimes we find even in our own work, so many things, sometimes we have a deadline, we have to send it off to publication. He never put any such restrictions on himself. The only restriction he put on himself was that he must be convinced that the book is ready. So he would refine it. And finally, it did not come out for almost 25 years after his death, it came out. There is an interesting story related to that. As an aside, I may mention, the manuscript was ready even before he died in 1950. And then it was decided that they should send this manuscript for a foreword by Radhakrishnan, who was at that time, had become the vice president. Then after vice president, then he became the president. And he would never found the time to write the foreword. And in his... I requested Nadoja S.R. Ramaswamy to write a foreword to the new edition that we had worked on, the reprint. So in that foreword, SRR has said, it was a Himalayan task to somehow bring it back and put it in the hands of Hiriyanna's grandson, who finally then gave all the permission for publication. Kavyalaya brought it out in a beautiful hardbound edition in 1975. Finally, the thing that Hiriyanna really stands for is what DVG himself calls as Swasthana Parijnana in his work Samskriti. The boundary of our knowledge, the limitations, and limitation is used in a negative sense in English, but the kind of boundaries of where we are and who we are, what we know. That boundary of his kshetra was very, very clear for Hiriyanna. He knew a lot of things, but he would only write about certain things which he was very, very convinced about. So kavya, literature was his field, chosen field, and philosophy to great extent, aesthetics to some extent, and that's it. He knew about so many things, but he chose to write only about these fields. He was very good in mathematics. He used to teach geography. He was good in music. But none of these things came out in any of his writings, except as examples. When you see his writing, as examples he would use these things. But he wrote about what he knew very, very thoroughly. DVG writes, I think it is very good if our public figures and orators and writers of our generation, they keep this in mind, that, we should know what our boundaries are. There is no point in talking about something we don't know so well, or even if it is something we have read, but it's not our chosen field, it is better to keep silent. In fact, I'm reminded of an episode that Dr. Ganesh once mentioned in connection with N. Ranganath Sharma. There was a big debate about certain philosophical point and Purva Mimamsa, and at the end of the debate, it was inconclusive. Ranganath Sharma was also in the audience. He came back home and he gave a very, very beautiful explanation for what could have been the right answer. And his friends were like, why did you keep quiet in the assembly? You should have just stood up and said, he said, I am a grammarian, so my place is in grammar. I am not a Purva Mimamsaka, so it is not my place to tell these things. Very few people have this awareness of where they are and what their boundaries are. Many times as I was going through this episode once again, I was reminded of once sitting with Nadoja S.R. Ramaswamy, and we were discussing about Hindu society and the perils of Hindu society and so on. He has given a sort of sutra, 3 things that have plagued Hindu society for all these years. And he calls it tokenism, cult building, and hero worship. Tokenism is where it is you don't mean something, but you just do some for lip sympathy. Then cult building is where, matha kattodo, like we say. You have certain ideology and you have people who align to that ideology. You don't agree with me, then you're out. If you agree with me, then you're in, this kind of mentality. And hero worship. If there's somebody who is doing some work, then you do hero worship and deify and so on. If people can learn even 1% of the qualities that Hiriyanna had, I think it is a fantastic cure for all these 3 evils that has been plaguing Hindu society. That is the nature and brilliance of Professor M. Hiriyanna. Sorry, I've taken a long time speaking about Hiriyanna, but I think he's such a remarkable character that it is worth...
You have used for 40 seconds one Hiriyanna, sir. I have counted it.
So he is such a remarkable character that I think I have gone into a little bit detail. Now the next episode is about N. Narasimharaja, who DVG calls his Atma Guru. Now he says, my intention is to write about my Atma Gurus. What is this Atma Guru? Atma Guru can mean multiple things. One, it can mean the Guru of my choice, Atma Guru, or the Guru who taught me about Atma, or it can mean Mukhya Guru, the most important Guru. Here he says, I am talking about Ishta Guru, my favorite teacher. Now it is not that I found him because I specifically searched for him. I did not evaluate his capabilities and say that, oh, he is worthy of being my teacher. No, it was just that, purely out of luck, we came to know each other. I was influenced by him and I could see that such a noble person should be my teacher. Sometimes these things happen without any premonition, without any preparation. Just it so happens you chance upon somebody and you develop this relationship. After all, in the Mahabharata, there is a famous quote, right? Yatha kashtancha sameyatam mahodadau sametya vyatiyatam tadvad bhuta samagama. This is also similar to what Rama tells Bharata when he comes to the forest, that just like in the huge ocean, 2 logs of wood come close to each other, and then after some time traversing together, the 2 logs go away. Same with human relationship. It is a very brutal truth, which when we first encounter it, we are shocked, but when we think about our own lives, that's exactly how it happens. We sometimes meet people because of proximity, because of working in the same office or studying in the same school. We are so close at some point. After a certain time, we drift apart for various reasons, not because of any enmity, not because of any bitterness, but simply because of life circumstances. So this is how it happens, and when we accept life with its rough edges, we are so much more happier. If we want everything to be perfect, like a straight line drawn in a T-square, we are going to be disappointed. So here DVG comes across Narasimharaja purely out of luck, and he chooses Narasimharaja to be a teacher. And DVG says, if I had told him that you are my guru, he would have disagreed with me outright. He would have said nothing of the sort. DVG says, I consider him as my teacher, but he never treated me as a student. Now, this is something that many of us can say about Dr. Ganesh. He will never agree that he is our guru. We treat him like a teacher, but he never treats us like a student. But in this case, DVG was talking about N. Narasimharaja, who was an advocate. The introduction to Narasimharaja itself is very interesting. In the 1907 or 1908, DVG was living in his in-laws' house in Chamarajpet. One day, this man comes into their house and says, oh, my turban has come undone. There are some music classes and all that happen in this house. So I think there will be some rasikas and Rumalu rasika. He says, turban connoisseurs. So can you please tie the turban for me? Then somebody comes forward and ties the turban and puts all the pins and makes it stay. He was working in the secretariat at that time. So he was such an important person who had done a MA and BL, and his father had arranged for a special horse-drawn cart to take him to the secretariat. Such a person randomly walking into a neighbor's house and saying, "Please tie my rumal," it became a big talk. Oh, such a humble person. He is so well-read, but he doesn't know how to tie a rumal, a kore rumal. So this became a talk of town that slowly started the connection between Narasimhamurthy and D.V. Gundappa. Now, Narasimhamurthy's father hailed from Nanjangud. The N in his name is Nanjangud Subbarao, who had made a name as a lawyer in Srirangapatna. And his brother, that is younger brother of Murthy, was N. Subbarao, who has earned fame as the Vice Chancellor of the University of Mysore at some point. And sister Kaveramma was married to Benne Govindappa's son, Benne Subbarao. Then this Narasimhamurthy's father, Nanjangud Subbarao, he had a friend by the name of Saligrama Subbarao, who was working as a government pleader. They used to often visit M. Srinivasa Iyengar, who used to run the Mysore Standard paper. That's when DVG was introduced to both the Subbaraos, Nanjangud Subbarao and Saligrama Subbarao. Then he came to know, of course, Narasimhamurthy also. And Narasimhamurthy had written, he had given a lecture on William Thackeray, the famous English novelist. This was later published in the Mysore Standard paper. When DVG met Narasimhamurthy, he said, "Oh, I read your article in the Mysore Standard, it has come out really well." So they were just speaking for a few minutes, and then Narasimhamurthy said, "So what are you doing, young man?" Whatever Thackeray did at that time, well, he did not understand what DVG meant. What do you mean by that? See, Thackeray had a job in Paris as a correspondent. He was working in an evening paper, and on that basis he got married. And as soon as he got married, promptly the newspaper shut down and he was without a job. Similarly, I also joined the Suryodaya paper and said I have job security now and got married, and the newspaper has stopped. So I am struggling to find a job. So I am also like Thackeray. So this was such a thing that Murthy never forgot this episode. He had a hearty laugh. A few years later, when DVG began the Karnataka bi-weekly, Narasimhamurthy was a person who supported him a great deal. He was very well connected. So immediately, the moment he came to know that Gundappa is starting a paper, he spoke to M.G. Varadacharya and Advocate Surya Prakasham, Thiruvengadam Mudalayar, C.S. Ananta Padmanabha Iyer, Dr. Kuni Kannan, all these people, and said we must support this young man. And because all these people had great regard for Murthy, they supported DVG. By this time already DVG says that Murthy had written a couple of erudite articles, and one of the articles was on the theory of sovereignty, and he had considered all the various opinions of John Stuart Mill and Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and various political philosophers. And it was published in Mysore Review. Here we see the kind of reading that a public servant had in those days. They were all expected to read some of these works. It was standard. Lot of people in that circle, whether it was Venkata Krishnaya, whether it was Narasimhamurthy, lot of people had this kind of wide reading. That also passed on to DVG, who was junior to them, and who DVG learned so much from these people, and that's how he got introduced to some of these great classics when it comes to economics and political science and so on. Similarly, Murthy gave him his personal copy of Edmund Burke, a historical study by John Morley. Many times we find it so difficult to begin studying in a particular field. We may be interested to know about something, but we often don't know where to start. It's a bigger problem today because of the proliferation of material, but even in those days, a lot of material was available, but where to start and what to read, in what order to read, this is a very, very big problem. In fact, that's one of the reasons why in Preksha there are so many book lists that are published, starting from the Ayurveda book list and the Vedanta book list and so on. Anybody wanting to study a subject, it is very important to have a guide on how to proceed, which is a simple book, what to read first, what to read next. This is not always available, especially when it is something outside of our academic circle. DVG, along with M.G. Varadacharya and Narasimhamurthy, used to often study the works of English poets and discuss critically appreciate the works and exchange ideas. That's how he got interested in so many of the great poets. Murthy also introduced DVG to Sigmund Freud and James Hutton, Henry Bassett, and so on. So many of the great people of that time. There is one very interesting episode with regard to his friend Surya Prakasham, who was also an advocate. So at that point of time, Murthy was working as the Shirastidar, in like an administrative officer in the cantonment court. And Thirumal Iyengar was the cantonment district judge, and the court building was next to some construction site. So there used to be a lot of noise, and every time Narasimharaja would go there and talk to the workers, please, can you stop making the noise, sir? I request you. You know, like he's a very polished guy. He goes to these construction workers, please, you should not make this noise. It's very disturbing. And they would say, sir, it's just over. Another few minutes, it will be done. Don't worry. We will stop. Don't worry. Absolutely. It's just 2 minutes. And that work will continue without any yatha prakara. It will continue. And finally, they got tired about half an hour or 1 hour later. Surya Prakasham also had an argument in the court. He had come there, and similar thing happened. And Surya Prakasham went there, and the crass Telugu used all sorts of bad language and said, I'm going to kick your thing, and did all this, and within moments that place was empty. So he comes and tells, did you see that, Murthy? That is how you have to deal with these fellows. Please request, all this won't work. And that was a long-standing joke for a long time between the two of them. Usually, people are very eager to get some promotion. They want to go to the next higher level, and there is so much of lobbying. In the case of N. Narasimharaja, one of the cantonment district judge, Ramaya Punja, was always trying to give him some promotion. He was so good, you wanted to make him a munsif or a sub-judge or whatever. Whenever there was a vacancy, he will recommend his name. And every time the request would go to Narasimharaja, he will very softly, he will say, I'm not interested in the promotion, because it would take him to Bellary, or it will take him to Coorg or some other place. Every time this guy was wondering, what is wrong with you? People are eager, you don't want to get promoted. Then he says, will I be able to find a M.G. Varadacharya in that place? Will I be able to find a Bhim Rao? Will I be able to find a D.V. Gundappa there? I don't want a promotion. Now, this tells you the greatness of DVG can be seen here. A person who was much senior to DVG, whom DVG considers as a guru, did not want to leave Bangalore because he would lose the company of people like DVG. Later in the Shishya Varga of DVG, like T.N. Padmanabhan and D.R. Venkatramanan, who were working in Subbarao, who were working in the AG's office, they refused to take any promotion because they didn't want to lose the proximity with DVG. So you can imagine what kind of attractive, charming personality DVG was. When Stuart Fraser was the British resident in the Mysore kingdom, the Fraser town in Bangalore is named after Stuart Fraser, I think. So at that time, Narasimharaja was working as a resident judicial officer. Whenever there was a case, the methodology in which Narasimharaja used to prepare everything always used to surprise Fraser. And when Fraser was retiring from work, by the time he also learnt about the deep interest that Murthy had in English literature, and he gifted some of the books, fine books of John Stuart Mill and other people, books on economics to Narasimharaja, and later that has come to the Gokhale Institute Library. Narasimharaja also was very, very fond of music. There is a nice episode where DVG and Murthy are sitting in the KT Appanna's Hindu Coffee Club. We will come to that later in this series. They are sitting and they see some preparation for a wedding happening in the other side of the road. Now, typically we will, some wedding. Narasimharaja has no such qualms. He goes there, walks up to that guy. So what is happening here, sir? There is a wedding. Oh, is there going to be music? Yes, there is going to be music. Oh, who is going to be performing? Tayappa is singing. Oh, can we attend? No, absolutely no qualms. Of course, you are most welcome. Please come. You are most welcome to attend. What time will it start? Sir, we are all business people. We have to finish everything, close down the shop and then come. So it will be easily about 8 o'clock. Don't worry. So then Narasimhurti calls one of the friends. He and DVG put their cycle in Aparna's coffee club. He says, you go and tell me in my house, this fellow's house is opposite mine, so go and tell in both the houses that we will be late. So this is the equivalent of our WhatsApp message, I will be late today. You know, instead of that, you send one fellow, you go and tell in both our houses that both these fellows will be late. So then they are roaming around that place and then finally land up at 8 o'clock. Then, so the performance is not yet started. Sir, the shops have to close. We are all business people, so it will start little later. Okay, no problem. We'll come back later. So they go and they have their dinner and everything and show up at 9 o'clock. By the time we start the concert, they are sitting, it's going on till 12, 12:30, and he starts singing Terati Agarada in Gauli Pantu. The depth of the singing, the emotion, it was so wonderful. He completely forgot the whole world around them. So DVG says, if somebody who has heard this rendition for even 10 minutes, it is worth, like an experience of 100 years. That is the depth of the singing. And even there, in the Kriti, what Tyagaraja has sung, he says, blinded by ego and jealousy and all these things, I'm unable to see the truth. So remove this veil of ignorance so I may see the truth. That is the meaning, he says. Can you not remove this veil which is blocking my vision? You can see the kind of connoisseurship of that period. There is one very interesting episode which I have to tell you before moving ahead. There is one Vidwan who had come during the Dasara season to Murthy's house. And around the time that DVG went there, this person also enters. He looks at the way DVG is dressed and he says, he's speaking in Tamil. Are you a singer? He says, no. Why? You don't have a throat? You are not. Is it enough to have a throat, sir? How can I? But you also worn the dhoti in the correct fashion and everything. You look like a singer. Meanwhile, the Murthy comes out and they sit on the jagali and the platform in front of the house. There is a veena kept there. So this person who's unknown person, he says, okay, I will play veena. You should sing now. Okay. TV is like, please, sir, I don't know how to sing. I cannot sing to save my life also. Please don't make me to sing. Okay, I will sing. And finally, he performed a little bit on the veena. He sings Riti Gauda and so on. DVG turns to Murthy and says, I am somehow unable to recognize this person. I have some vague memory. He says, this man is N.V. Raghavan, who's the Auditor General of India. Auditor General of India in those days was a person probably getting the biggest salary. And such a person is just casually coming to Murthy's house and singing and, being... Today, I will be surprised if the person knows what is Riti Gauda, the Auditor General of India today. We may not even know Carnatic music. Murthy also was very fond of learning veena. He used to learn from many people. Of course, his veena lessons would never go forward because he was very scared. Nobody should hear him practice. He will close the door. He will put a cloth on the window so nobody should hear. And even during the classes, he will tell the guru, oh, you play so well. Please play something. Let me listen. And after the teacher has played a little bit, oh, it was wonderful. We will continue our lesson anyway next class. So this is how his thing used to go forward. And he was a sort of a prudish person, like we say, Madivanta. And whenever there was a word like Sarasuda, Sarasa, this kind of, there was a lot of Shringara Bhava in our, especially in a lot of the Varnams in Carnatic music. The most of the thing is Shringara Bhava, very romantic sentiment. Every time he came across this word, he did not know Telugu. So he will ask DVG, what is this meaning, Sarasuda, what does it really mean? And DVG says, it is the good fortune of music that this man did not know Telugu. So he used to say, oh, these are words which are used to praise the gods. Sarasa means Mahalakshmi, one who is beloved to Lakshmi, that is Mahavishnu. So Sarasa is a divine form of the connoisseur and so on. And then he would be very, very comfortable. Oh, okay, fine. It is not something which is vulgar. It's not... Then there are so many episodes about his, gentleness and magnanimity towards different people. His interest in folk culture. He was very, very interested in understanding the, the life of different people. Although he was, very, very conservative in the sense of Madivanta, he was very interested to know about the life of the people. He used to live with his old grandmother and Hiriyanna. So once she came back home after a discourse on the Purana. So he said, Giri, which story was the topic of discussion today? So Hiriyanna was, this is the story of Hanuman making fun of the Lord of Lanka. So what is that story, he says. Hey, Murthy, you don't even know this story which comes in Ramayana, don't you remember? Hanuman used his power to increase the length of his tail and made a throne which was thrice as big as Ravana and all these things. And Ravana said, what kind of a monkey you are? And Hanuman says, you ask me who I am, who are you? And Ravana says, I am a person with 10 heads, I have defeated all the Dikpalakas and everything. So Hanuman says, you are the person with 10 heads and you are the person who fled from Kishkinda, who was defeated by Vali, and you are the one wailing in pain and so on. You see, look at the response that Hanuman gave Ravana, and in this all this enthusiasm, and this fellow is not able to control his laughter. And, although he had great regard for his grandmother, he was having fun at her expense because she was so devoted and believing all these things. And even now, sometimes there's a lot of discussion about, this episode is not in the critical edition. We should look at this particular reference. Whereas DVG writes, this kind of simple devotion is very venerable. This is submission to the divine. So this simple devotion, quote, simple devotion is at the root of all the great accomplishments. If some of the losses incurred by society because of over-reliance on scientific miracles has to be reversed, then a progressive mind has to be tempered with such simple devotion. It is so important. So in the name of progressive thinking and in the name of modernity, if we let go of these simple devotion, simple pleasures of life, then it is a big loss. As always, DVG talks about some book club they created, and then later some Bangalore Citizens Club, which was often called as Bangalore Cracks Club, and so on. Now, in this Bangalore Citizens Club, there was this, they said we should meet once a month. We will have a discourse by some good scholar. So the food will be arranged by K.T. Appanna. He has got the Hindu Coffee Club. He will arrange the food. And the first lecture was, it was in the Irish Press building, which was Gundopan's house on the street, Gundopan Street. Earlier we saw the Gundopant road being the abode of many Vidwans. So in Siddikatte, in KR Market, Gundopan's house, that was the location of this discourse. So M.G. Varadacharya was the speaker. As soon as he came, he smelt this wonderful food. He said, you see, food is embodiment of divinity. Then they were saying that food will be served after the lecture. No, food is an embodiment of divinity. We should not disrespect food. So, lecture is not going anywhere. First, let us have the meal, then we can go to the lecture. Then naturally, everybody agreed. Oh, correct, very good point. So, then we had a fantastic meal, and as a formality, for some 15 minutes, he spoke, and they said, anyway, this is the first meeting. Things will get organized better next time. So the next meeting again was 1 month later. It was on Grotius, the father of international law, and N. Narasimharaja was the speaker. Again, the food was arranged by K.T. Appanna. Somebody said, see, the lecture is the most important thing. This insignificant thing is food. Let us get the insignificant thing out of the way first, then we can go to the lecture. And they started the food, the trivial issue of the food, which was sambar, and there was onion and brinjal, sandige, large size papad, and chiroti, paisam, ambade, all this thing. By the time they finished everything, it was 10 o'clock. And then our Narasimharaja started reading the speech. Meanwhile, you could hear some snoring. 4 or 5 people had fallen asleep. DVG writes, Varadacharya, Bhimrao and myself are the only ones awake, sheer determination. That's how we could keep ourselves awake. And then after about 4-5 minutes, Varadacharya said, let us take it as read. We will print it in the Karnataka. People can peacefully read it. So this is the what happened in the club. And after some time, once it was published in the Karnataka, somebody read that and said, what is this atrocious thing? Who can understand all these Grotius and all? Why do you want to write about all these topics? So DVG says, this is the fruit of scholarship. So like this, they started this 1 and 2 and many study groups like this. It will start and end. But Nirantaravagi, there was a continuous stream of study circles and groups that DVG was a part of. Murthy would make fun of these study circles and groups and say that it's of not much value, but still he would be very enthusiastic about it. And he is the person, one of the people who was responsible to push DVG into public life, along with Vajpayee and Venkata Subbaiah. He was the person who often told DVG about getting into public life. He knew the importance of young people like DVG getting into public sphere, how to prepare for these meetings, how to read the material, what is the manner in which you want to present something to the municipal council or the senate and all these things. Whenever you have an issue, you have to look at all the different points of view. So like this, so many aspects, these are kind of the soft skills that a statesman needs. Those were taught by Narasimhamurthy to DVG. In one of the headings in this episode, he says Nitya Purandaradasa. So Narasimhamurthy had a very handsome income, but he was always short of money because he did not know what is the meaning of thrift. He was always, he was giving somebody or ask something, and almost like we say, we have a hole in the hand, right? So the hands are porous. Whatever is there won't stay with him. He will just give it off. He would say, without corporate societies and banks, where should people like me get loans, and how could I save myself from humiliation? So he wore some old clothes, and he was more interested in the intellectual things. Once he was on his way to go to the toilet, he is holding the lota, and he, without even realizing that, he is asking DVG, according to Dvaita, what is the difference between Leibniz's opinion and Pascal's opinion? And DVG says, is it so important that I should tell the answer before you go to the loo or after you come back? And then he realized, oh my God, I have to go to the, wait, I have to go to the loo. So this was the manner in which he was so immersed in the intellectual world. And he was very careful about any conclusions. He used to say, just like conscience is for ourselves, conclusion also is for ourselves. He will not make any pronouncements very easily. He will say, this is one way of looking at it, another way of looking at it. You may take a decision. So like Hiriyanna, he was not jumping to conclusion. He was very, very careful about conclusion. There also, when talking about Narasimhamurthy, he writes about his wife who supported him, because otherwise to live with some people like this, you can imagine how difficult it would be. Finally, there's an episode on this Swinburne's writing, which I told I will come back to. At one point of time, DVG was very much impressed by Swinburne's writing. So he read all his works and letters and books and everything. He told Murthy, wow, what a bombastic style, amazing, fantastic. And, at that point of time, he said, you're just very emotional about Swinburne. This is all the emotion which is speaking. All these juvenile minds will be enamored by Swinburne. So DVG was very angry. He said, oh my God, this is, this fellow doesn't have any good taste, and he just lets it be. 25 years later, DVG writes, DVG reads an essay by the famous commentator Edmund Gross, goes on Swinburne and his writings. And after that, he looks at Swinburne's writing once again. Finally, he shows that article to Narasimhamurthy. And then he says, what is your opinion now? DVG says, I have grown nearly a fourth of a century since then. My tastes are different now. Swinburne's is a flowery language rather than showing true emotions. I see bombastic words, rhyming phrases, beautiful figures of speech, but I do not see a solid core. If you want to improve our English vocabulary, if you want to know how to use these words, then Swinburne is the best guy. I don't deny that there is beauty, but that beauty is not sufficient for me. It is not enough for me. And Murthy said, I had guessed long back that eventually you will come to this opinion. So that is Murthy. So many primary sources he had read, and he knew he was widely knowledgeable, whether it was English literature or history, economics, political science, law, whether it was science, philosophy, all these things he was very, very well read. And the manner in which Murthy guided, corrected, refined DVG's knowledge and understanding is something unparalleled. Again, as always, DVG uses three words. Saujanya, very gentle, courteous, respectful. Then udatta manaskate, a magnanimous, generous heart, and pramanikate, honesty. This has been an ideal guide. Narasimhurthy has been an ideal guide to DVG in all these matters. Then we come to Polepalli Chinnaswami Shetty, where is a very interesting episode. Before we go to him, we will talk about one K. Sheshayar, Dr. Sheshayar, who was the person responsible for introducing DVG to Polepalli Chinnaswami Shetty, because DVG was in want of a loan at that point of time, 1910, 1911. So this Sheshayar was from Devaraya Samudra and a Sanskrit scholar and Ayurveda doctor. And he had also joined the Theosophical Society. He worked with Annie Besant for some time and Subramania Iyer and other people. He had one Indian Swadeshi store. And he was very, very particular about Swadeshi. And along with Dr. Ramarao, they used to have a shop where they prepare this lehyas and certain kind of halwa and all this thing. It would be stored in bottles. One day, the A.R. Nageshwar Iyer, a famous advocate, he came there and he would frequently come to the store. One day, he pointed at this bottle. What is this? He says, this is Kushmanda Lehya. Oh, Kushmanda Lehya. Okay, Kushmanda is pumpkin. Lehya, you know what is Lehya. It's a kind of medicine. What is it for? Oh, it is to strengthen the body, sir. It is a fantastic Lehya. You should consume in small quantities every day. It is very good. I would highly recommend it. So Nageshwar Iyer took one bottle and went to the court. It was about 10 or 11 in the morning. Again at around 2 o'clock he comes back. He says, that thing you gave in the morning, that Kushmanda, can you give me one bottle? So he says, okay, maybe he has tried it, it's good, he wants to give it to somebody. He gives another bottle. Then by around 5 p.m. he comes back again. He says, that Kushmanda, that bottle, sir, already I have given you 2 bottles. What did you do with it? What will I do with it? I ate it. What else will I do with it? Then this guy is shocked. Sir, you have eaten 2 full bottles. You are supposed to have it like a small quantity. You are not supposed to eat it like a full bottle. So please, it will be good fortune if you spend tonight very peacefully. So it is not for, just because Lehya is tasty, it is not to be eaten at this rate. So this was the kind of medical practice that he had. And when I read this episode, it always gives me a lot of solace, because I am also like that. I love to have lehas. So I'm not the first person to have this weakness. So Sheshayar introduced DVG to Polepalli Chinnaswami Shetty. Here it is noteworthy to see that on and off DVG used to take small loans from some of the business community, from people of the business community, either in connection with his family responsibilities or running the newspaper. And it was during these difficult times where he would take a loan and repay the loan, but did not accept to cash a check from Vishveshwaraya, did not cash a check that Mirza Ismail gave him. Any of these things which were given to him by the government for his inputs as a great public intellectual, he never encashed those checks, because he said, I am a journalist and I should earn money only through my vritti. So even at a time where he was in deep trouble, he had rightfully got this money. He had not taken it from anybody. It was given to him by responsible people in the government, appreciating his work, but he never encashed that. He would rather go take a loan and repay it. So when we see this in the context of that story, it takes on a certain different meaning. So then Chinnaswami Shetty gave him the loan. Later they were colleagues in the municipal council. And he was very well known in giving lot of loans and other things to people. But he never pressurized people. So even when it comes to money lending, you don't have to be very forceful. He used to cut a lot of slack, and he would allow for certain omissions and so forth. Very beautiful discussion happens once between DVG and Chinnaswami Shetty with regard to he was constructing a house in Baswangudi. And DVG says, sir, I have a problem with all these Vaishyas. You are all splurging money, and you are, why are you doing this kind of materialistic pleasures, so much of fanfare? Sir, who is getting troubled by this? If we spend money, we are earning money to be happy. No, I didn't say you're not entitled to happiness, but you should not splurge money in this kind of thing which does not give any reward. So what about other people, sir? Are Brahmanas not doing it? Sir, you are right. According to me, nobody should do this. Everybody should have a limit for the spending for their pleasures. He says especially it is very important for Vaishyas because they are the caretakers of society. They are the trustees. It is their duty to enhance the wealth of the society. They should foster it, that they should utilize it for a bigger purpose. They are the people who are guiding all of us in saving money. If they start blowing up the money, what will happen? And so on. So then Chinnaswamy Shetty says that what you say is correct, but I don't think this is unnecessary spending because I have a profitable business. Whatever profit I have got from the business, I am using to build a house. And when I'm building a house, so many people are getting employment. They are all getting paid. I am helping so many people by doing this. So therefore, it is whether it is a carpenter or a mason or a construction worker, all of them are getting employed because of this. So how do you say it is not helping people? Then DVG also agrees. And that idea that the best charity is by giving people jobs, this is seen in our Polepalli Chinnaswamy Shetty. On one side, he spent money to build a house. On the other side, talking about Vaishya Dharma, DVG tells another episode when there was some wedding there was a Graha Pravesha of Srinivasacharya, one of his friends. And on the way back, he was carrying all the Gandha and Pushpa and Phala, Tambula. When he saw Chinnaswamy Shetty, by mistake, one arecanut fell down, this what we say, paka or adike, one piece fell down. And DVG didn't do anything about it. He continued speaking. Immediately he bent down, took it, cleaned it with his edge of his dhoti, blew, again he cleaned it. He said, please keep this, don't waste it. In case you don't want it, give it to somebody else. That poor man will throw it into his mouth and enjoy it. So on the one hand, there was importance given to grandeur to spend money. On the other hand, no wasteful expenses, value for even a small thing. So this kind of quality we see in Chinnaswamy Shetty. So my time is up for today. Tomorrow we will see another remarkable character, businessman, Mandi Hiriyanna. Thank you so much for your time. Namaste.